back to Build Live, powered by Channel 9. I'm Christina Warren, and I'm joined by an awesome panel today. First up is my pal, Jim Bennett.
Hello.
How are you doing today? How's your build?
I'm good. Build is awesome. Seen some really cool stuff. Love it. Can't wait to get playing.
So, okay, we gotta first identify the elephant in the room. We are on an all things mobile panel, primarily made up of kind of the Xamarin team, and I'm wearing a t-shirt that says I'm a PC.
Yeah, it's awful.
It is awful. Although the irony is anybody who knows me knows that I'm like a diehard Mac user. So I wore this to be ironic and to, like, you know, go team, support Joe today. But we actually have a great panel. We've got Samina here, who's in the keynote, and we've got Thomas, both from talking about App Center and Xamarin, some mobile stuff. And if you have questions for us, because we are live right now, while you're watching the live session, sign in and click on the Let's Chat button, and then let us know what questions you have for the panel, and we're just going to kind of get started talking about stuff. So.
Cool. Yeah, so I've been a huge fan of App Center ever since it first came out. I was lucky enough to be an MVP at the summit where they announced it to us in kind of a closed preview. I really love it.
We know.
And, and there's obviously fantastic release yesterday of on the GitHub Marketplace. So, Samina, do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Where should I start?
Just start from the beginning. What's the highlight? What's the big news? What's the breakout news?
So the breakout news is that anybody who develops a mobile app and they have their repository in GitHub, it's super easy to get started. It's like, if you don't have continuous integration set up, the notification pops right there in your pull request, and from there, it's super easy to get started with App Center, to get your repository ready to build, and then we report the status back to GitHub. So back in your pull request, you have all the data about the build. So it's like super nice, everything in one place, and easy to get started.
It seems really, really easy to do. It seems very much a one-click. I've created a mobile app, and I guess this works across iOS and Android and Xamarin, React Native, all the supported platforms. You create the repository, you put your code in there, GitHub pull request picks it up, and it just recognizes this, puts the link, you click a button, sign in.
Yes, what's super cool is that GitHub also recognizes if it's a mobile project, and they take you straight to the mobile CI category in the marketplace.
Nice.
So even they have the smarts to know where to take you, which is super nice.
Nice. And then you click it, you get it set up, the build happens, any build failures, it highlights red in GitHub, and if it goes green, people can then merge the pull request through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is this available now, or is this coming in the future?
It's available as of yesterday.
As of yesterday. Okay, great. So fantastic.
Excellent. I need to go and get up and try it. Yeah. Okay, so that works obviously with the builds. So we do the builds, we prove that they work. And there's a whole lot of other things in App Center around testing those builds. So do you want to talk a bit more about things like App Center Test and how we can validate that, although the code actually compiles, that we have a good quality app?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we hear a lot, and as users we face it all the time, is that there's a lot of devices.
Yes.
And testing against all the gazillion of types of Android devices, and lately also different sizes on iPhones, it's becoming out of control. And we have this huge cloud of thousands of devices that we host for our users, and they can run their UI tests on these devices, which is super cool because we've seen how people used to have them in some drawers, with many cables, USB cable stuff, and now they don't need that. So basically, once their build is completed, they can run their UI test on our real devices, and if all looks good, then they can distribute the build to users.
And it's not only the newest devices, but also gives you all the old devices with all the old operating system versions. So you can get an Android device that still runs KitKat, right? You don't have that at home and in the office anymore, but you still can get it in our test cloud.
Yeah. So you can still test it and make sure that your code will, at least as far back as you're willing to support.
Right.
Yeah, or a user reports a bug, and then you can investigate the bug on that device and run a test and see if they can reproduce that issue.
So we can even do the bug testing.
So it's not debugging, but you run your tests on, you can pick the devices you want to test on and create a device set.
Okay.
And use that device set to run your tests, and then you validate the screenshots against your newest builds and so on.
Yeah, this is incredibly powerful. You think with iOS that Apple don't sign the old operating system.
Yes, I mean, they stop after, what is it, like 5 days usually?
Yeah, so if you want to have an iOS 9 device because you've got a customer having a problem on iOS 9, you physically cannot do it. You're scouring eBay or Craigslist to try and find an old device you can buy. That problem goes away because you run it inside App Center Test. Same with Android. There's how many thousand Android devices? So how does it work with, if somebody has a problem on a device that you don't have? Is there a way to get the certain devices from, like China, for example, has a massive fragmented market. Is there a way to get those devices into App Center Test? Can they post them to you? Or?
That's a really good question. So usually we are trying to be as proactive as possible. So whenever there's like a new big release coming up, we're always getting the devices as soon as possible. But sometimes it happens that users want some devices that we don't have, and then we kind of look, if there's something other customers want as well, or something that only that customer wants, and we take it from there.
Okay, so you kind of evaluate it based off the market. Say things like India and China, they have a whole lot of awesome devices that they're outside of sort of European or American markets. So if there's a big demand for a device in China, you'd put it on board. Okay, so we've talked about build.
Okay, real quick, we have a new addition to our panel. So,
as predicted.
Miguel made it. Miguel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I had a mix up.
But no problem, we made it work. All right, sorry, Jim, but I wanted to go back to you. I just wanted to be able to let everyone know that Miguel is here, and you ask your question, then we're going to take some reader questions.
Okay, yeah, so just thinking about the whole flow of build. So in GitHub, you get the build going with pull request. You then have the automated testing through App Center Test. How would you then integrate that into like a CI/CD pipeline? How would you do multiple branches? How would you manage releasing to quality assurance or to users when you've got a final build?
Do you want to take it or should I?
Sure, I can take it. I mean, it's so basically the way we prescribe it to our users is that you pick a branch for every release target. So you would, for example, release your develop branch to your internal team and your staging branch to external testers, and then your production branch to the App Store. And we actually have now direct integration between build and the stores. So you can ship your build directly after the pull request was merged to Apple Test Flight, to the Apple App Store, or to Google Play, to all the different stages in Google Play. So we are now enable this continuous flow, not only to automated testing, beta testing through the new Hockey app in our distribution service, and then on to the App Store, to the major app stores. And we also support the Microsoft Company Portal called Intune that you can use for your enterprise distribution in-house.
Okay, so you can actually manage all the branches, you get the whole flow from end to end. And I've seen as well personally with things like App Center Test, where you're running on multiple devices, you can capture screenshots. One requirement for actually releasing on the App Store is you have to supply screenshots. And App Center Test just creates those for you.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful for getting the flow.
Especially as you can pull those screenshots not only in English, but in I think 10 other languages. So we can automate the whole screenshot creation for all the different languages. And then one thing you didn't mention yet is that App Center is API first. So our team develops an API for everything before they build a UI. So you can download those screenshots with a script and then upload them, for example, through Fastlane to the App Store as well.
Yeah, that is incredible. I love the fact it's API first. I've done things like in Jenkins, actually set up build pipelines in Jenkins, calling out to the API for App Center, allowing me to mix and match it with my own build systems, my own tools, my own internal testing, whatever I need to do. So that's fantastic.
So moving away from App Center for just a second, I'm sure we'll get back to it, but we're looking at viewer questions, and if you've got them, continue to ask them. Rick asked, and I was waiting for this. I was waiting for somebody to ask the Windows Mobile question. I knew it was going to come. Are there any? Yeah, exactly. Are there any converters being worked on to bring a UWP app to Xamarin? So, if somebody was building an app for Windows 10 Mobile, RIP, we miss you. Let's pour one out, but it's gone. And would like to port it to Android or as a Xamarin app. Is anything like that being worked on?
No, we're not working on any tool to do that migration because it's, at a fundamental level, it's a little bit like a language. It's like saying, is there an automated tool that can reliably convert English to Spanish? So we're not really focused on that area. What I think it's important for developers to understand is that the mobile space is a very competitive space, and you need to embrace the platform, you need to embrace the idioms of the platform. And if you already have a UWP app, perhaps the best exercise that you can do is essentially split your code up into what is the spirit of the app and what is the user interface of the app, right? And then build a native user experience. Today on my talk, I'm going to discuss a little bit about what happens to your app in the marketplace. So once you launch your app, you might have spent a year building your app, and then you launch it on the marketplace, and out of 1 million downloads, you can make a couple of crucial mistakes along the way, and you end up only retaining some 20% of the customers.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what people need to understand is really that what actions they take on each one of these steps that makes their adoption drop, and the drops are very significant. They're not they're not trivial. And one of these is this thing, when people opt to not embrace the native platform. So we generally don't invest in that area, which is how do we migrate automatically something from one place to another? Because we think that you really should embrace the native platform, and that is one of the key things that you need to do. There's other things that you should do,
Sure.
and what the talk for more details. But I think that what you need to do is you can split these two things, and then you can build multiple UIs, and then be native on Android, be native on iOS, be native on Mac. And I'm getting all mixed up, but. And so no, we're not.
Okay, no, it makes sense. This is another question that's coming in. Are there any Cordova tools, any new Cordova tools for Visual Studio or for App Center?
We, not for Visual Studio. We have not updated the Visual Studio Cordova tools, but what we've noticed is that the Cordova crowd is, it's a JavaScript crowd,
Yeah.
and they tend to like more an experience like VS Code. So what we've seen is people moving from the Visual Studio and Cordova tools over to Visual Studio Code, which is better suited to that sort of development environment. So, and in that world, it's kind of self-sufficient, and there's a lot of work happening in that space. So I think it's just a matter of the communities, and the communities have different choices and preferences for what they're doing. And the same goes for React Native. They're also predominantly like VS Code for their work.
Okay.
In App Center, we have a SDK for Cordova. We launched that between Connect and now.
Okay.
So it's available open source on GitHub. People can contribute to it. So yeah, we have Cordova support on the SDK side.
And also for the distribution part, doesn't really matter what the app is written in.
Yeah.
You can distribute the IPA or the APK to anybody.
So we had another question. Is there any news about for App Center from a WPF point of view?
No.
No. All right. Just wanted to
Easy.
Put the nail on that comment. What about is there a way to integrate App Center with the STS build tasks?
Yes.
Yes. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we already have in VSTS 2 build tasks. One is App Center upload and the other one App Center test. So if you have your build CI pipeline in VSTS, you can run your CI pipeline and then do code analysis and whatever else you do in VSTS, and then put the App Center test task, test your build, your IPA on real devices in App Center, and then distribute it through App Center, and then you see all your tests and also distribution groups in App Center.
And again, everything is API first, so as long as you can run a PowerShell script, you can just do whatever you want from VSTS. We have those 2 official tasks, and then we have VSTS repositories in App Center build, and we have work item integration, so whenever you get a crash report, we create a work item in VSTS. So there's integrations on both sides, and they kind of like tie together as you want.
Great. What about for Visual Studio for Mac? Obviously, we've talked about live share, and that's coming out of beta. Does that also? When is Visual Studio for Mac going to get screen and code sharing for collaboration?
Well, the short answer today is that it's not there yet. The longer answer is that what we started to do is essentially take our the previous open source IDE and Visual Studio, and we're starting to combine pieces of the code together. So we're starting to bring more and more code into the open source code base, capabilities that did not exist before. I would say that right now our focus has been really on addressing the majority of the people's complaints. So live sharing is great, it's a fantastic feature, and we will get it, but people said, hey, listen, this is fantastic, I like what you've done with mobile, I like what you've done with the room, but last year we launched support for .NET Core and ASP.NET Core, and that crowd of developers needed strong support for Blazor, which is the template system that ASP.NET uses. TypeScript and JavaScript are key to this environment. So these were 3 big gaps that we had in our story. We had HTML and JS and all that already ported, but these 3 capabilities were completely lacking, and debugging of these capabilities. So in the version that we released yesterday, we brought those 3 things. That's a big theme of things that people were missing. As well as TFS integration. So we're getting there one step at a time, and bringing more code from Visual Studio over to the Mac, and we'll get there. But it's it's a journey.
It's a journey. Let me ask you, and I'm going off script a little bit, but because you mentioned, the kind of the challenges of kind of bringing these features over, and a lot of the things you're mentioning are already in VS Code. So where do you kind of see for developers, kind of especially on mobile,
Yes.
living between the two? And
What happens with mobile, at least with the .NET tooling, is that. So first off, one of the challenges with mobile is that beyond the editing of your code, there's this surrounding shell, an infrastructure that goes with it. So there are things like provisioning, entitlements, asset management, resources, translation, all these things that, for better or worse, were designed with compiled language in mind, or were designed with tooling in mind. So when it comes at least to .NET, the simpler, smoother answer is to use an IDE that essentially supports your ecosystem. Now that said, some people use VS Code for editing their code and then they go back to the IDE, but the majority of our users doing mobile development with .NET need the supporting infrastructure that goes with it. So it's certainly possible to write dozens of commands. If we had taken an approach like API first or command line first, we could probably build those things, but those things don't exist today. So you still need to go back to the IDE and do all this stuff. And even if you went with a command line first approach, now you got to memorize the hundreds of options that go with it, right? So I think that just in terms of onboarding and making a smoother experience, for mobile, really our focus is to get all the IDE experience in a great place first.
I guess things like designers, previewers, that doesn't really...
I forgot those, yes, I forgot those things, right. And in designers, when you add elements into the UI, you want to wire those up into the source code, you want to automatically inject it, when you make changes to the code, you want those reflected in the UI. So, it's possible, I'm sure that it can be done, it's just, we have a long backlog of other things that we really need to do for developers, and we're going to put them on the IDE first, on both Visual Studio and Visual Studio for Mac.
There's been some quite cool announcements around Xamarin over yesterday and today. Things like the Hyper-V support for the Android emulator is very cool. Things like Forms 3. What do you say your favorite things that we've just released?
Well, there are my favorite pieces, so things that I personally enjoy, but there's also the things that matter the most to customers. And I would say that of the things that matter the most to customers, having a smooth experience for Android was a big problem. So one thing that we didn't really see at a long distance was the fact that as people started to do more Docker development and cloud development on their machines using Docker, these would come in direct conflict with Android emulation. So we ended in a position where developers had to choose one or the other. And that was just not good. That was not good. It made, it made the Android development a chore. It made people up for other options. So you had to have, you had to make an ugly choice. So we worked with the Windows team for the last year and a half, I think, to improve Hyper-V. So they actually went and modified the Windows kernel. They added capabilities to the kernel. They actually attempted one approach, and then they said, this is not going to work because of reasons. And then they went back, I don't know if I can say the reasons, they went back and they built a completely different approach. And once they had that approach in place, we worked to get the Android emulator upstream, because what we've done in the past, both Xamarin and Microsoft, was we took the open source Android emulator and we patched it, modified it, and got into the business of maintaining a fork, right? And it's just incredibly expensive. And also it's a bad experience, and we can't deliver Google Play service. There's all kinds of, it was messy, it was ugly, right? So now we have an experience. We contributed the patches upstream to Google. This is going to every Android developer, Microsoft or not. If you want to use Java or Kotlin, and you want to get an experience out of the box, it will work for you too. So with Windows April, the April edition, and the new Android emulator, you can run all these machines virtualized side by side. So I think for consumers, it's probably, and developers, it's probably the biggest piece of news And then I have my pet features, but they're, in comparison, they're like, oh, we added this amazing flag. You're going to love it, right? But
I guess carrying on with the theme of making it really easy for developers to get started, we talked about Android. On the iOS side, we've been working to make that easier. Things like the automatic provisioning and the Wi-Fi debugging.
Right.
The Wi-Fi is huge.
Wi-Fi, it's awesome. So what are your thoughts on those particular features?
Well, like I said, I think that for a lot of these were lifestyle changes, right? So Android was definitely a lifestyle change. It changes what was possible to do within the realm of your possibilities and how much pain you were willing to endure. At one point you said, you know what, I'm just going to put a web page and I deal with this later. So, compared to that, yes, Mac provisioning is nice, and we think we're going to make a smoother experience. Another big problem that we had that it doesn't, it's not as big as the Android and Hyper-V is just when you open a project from a third party, or a friend in the team shares a project they built, it turns out that they're using a different Android SDK. Now, if you've done Android development, you know that this, it looks trivial on paper, but getting the right Android SDK, updating your SDK, updating your emulator, updating your images, getting the image reconfigured, rebooting your emulator, and then somebody checks in a change, and then you gotta spend another 30 minutes fixing that. So now we take care of that. So Visual Studio will take care of all of this. So we call it automatic SDK provisioning. So you do a git checkout from a rando project on GitHub, and we'll make sure that all your environment is set up. And the nice thing is also that it reduces the installation time, right? So now when you install, we're constantly reducing the payload of the things that you need to install to get started really with Xamarin, and we'll install the things on demand. But I'm glad that you know much more about my product than I do. So that's really excellent.
I've been digging, I've been playing. I do have to just drop in one other small question. This is not a particularly big feature, but I'm a fan of F#, and I know you're a fan of F# as well. And we have been doing some work internally in Visual Studio for Mac to make it just a little bit more F# friendly. Do you see this carrying on? Do you see F# becoming more and more of a first-class supported language inside Visual Studio and Visual Studio for Mac for Xamarin apps?
Well, I think that there's been a trend among developers recently, in particular with the React model has popularized this model. Elmish has done this too for web apps, and they've done it also they're doing it now for mobile. And it's a new way of thinking about building applications. So for years, we .NET developers have been thinking about the MVVM pattern and XAML and two-way data bindings, and this was sort of this was our lingo. This was where we felt comfortable working, and it has many benefits, but also it has a very high cognitive overhead. And what I like about this Elmish model, and we have a prototype now working on F#. Don Syme from F#, the designer of the F# language, has been working on this, is how to write mobile applications using this Elmish model. And what is very nice about F# is it's such a compact language that when you see a full application written in F# it's like, in Elmish, in the Elmish model in particular, you look at this thing and you go, where's the code? When you look at this thing, it's like, this almost looks like the boilerplate to get started, but it's already the whole app, right? So I like what's happening in that space. I think we still need to get over how do we get more people interested in F#? Or alternatively, how do we extend the C# language to get some of the capabilities that allow Elmish to be so clean, right? So I think we're working on those two fronts. One is how do you really make F# very easy to use and make mobile applications very easy with F#, and also how do we improve C# so you can get the same benefits.
I know what you mean about the lines of code. I've recently used the Elmish forms to build a tic-tac-toe app, and normally it would be pages upon pages of code, and it was that much code, and you've got...
Yeah, tic-tac-toe is a good example, but there's more complicated things, and Don is going systematically over all these scenarios and trying to map them into the Elmish model. So we're still working on it. It's not finished, but it's getting there. It's very interesting work.
So we had one other question. This has been sitting here for a while, so I want to go ahead and get to it while we still have a few minutes. Some of the functionality that's part of App Center has also been part of Visual Studio Online. Is that going to be merged, or are those features going to be retired? They're just going to continue to coexist?
No and no. So Visual Studio Online doesn't exist anymore. It's VSTS or Team Services.
Right.
And Team Services is all about your team, right? Your work items, your repositories. And it also has a build pipeline that is very customizable and allows you to deploy to Azure. And Donna will talk about
Yes.
it all afternoon, I'm sure. And then App Center is all about your apps, right? And we have test and distribution and analytics and crashes. So they're living next to each other, and we will align them better in the future and have more integrations and then enable developers to do more with both products, but we're not merging them and we're not retiring them.
Okay.
Cool, so I've got one more question on App Center. Just one of the cool things with App Center is the analytics, the metrics, all the data that we capture about people. And obviously there's been a big push globally to try and manage people's privacy better. The European Union, I'm British,
GDPR?
I'm part of that. We've been pushing GDPR. We've been trying to give people ownership of their own data. And then you look at things like the scandals with other big companies who are not using people's data in the right way. And I know a lot of work's been done around this inside App Center. So can you talk a bit more about how people can delete data and maintain data and manage their user privacy?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work. A lot of work.
So at Microsoft, our customers always own the data, right? We're not using the data for anything. Our developers are not looking into the data. We're not selling the data. And now with GDPR, we're adding more APIs and more features and flows that allows our customers, our developers, our customers are developers, obviously we're a developer division, to help their customers to delete their data, right? So you have an app in the App Store and you're collecting crash reports and now the user don't like you anymore and he asks you to delete the crash reports. We give you an API to identify those crash reports and then delete them securely from the system. That's kind of like the work we've been working on, and we will go through that process over the next couple of weeks and months, because if you think about it, this, crash reports is a really big data set, and if deleting like single pieces of this over time is a complicated process, and you don't want to download like hundreds of millions of crash reports to your local machine to find the one that you want to delete, right? So we're kind of like working through this process with our customers, identifying their needs, and then shipping new APIs to them.
And the interesting part with GDPR is that it's not finishing in May,
Yeah.
but it's like every new feature that we'll be working on, we have to think about it that has to be GDPR compliant. So it's just like, on the list of things to do for each feature is like GDPR compliant. If not, we have to address it.
That's a great point. Say that again so that people at home kind of really understand that, because it doesn't just stop in May. It really starts, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way we have to develop features and to ship features to our customers, with the idea that they have to be GDPR compliant.
And that's also where our open source SDK helps us really, because every customer, every developer out there can look into our SDKs, can see what data is getting collected, can review the pull requests, and then hopefully nobody makes a mistake and accidentally starts collecting an IP address or a phone number or something like that. But basically the open source ensures that our developers trust us and trust to put our SDK into their apps.
So are we planning on publishing any best practices for people? And we were talking earlier, you mentioned it's actually good to capture usernames to make traceability easier. So are we going to be publishing any best practices?
Yes, we're working on a doc set. So we are App Center docs are on docs.microsoft.com, and we will publish, I think, next week a couple of, we call them C2 scenarios, which is the customers of our customers, how they can delete their data.
Yeah. We have some pull requests already.
Excellent, excellent. We've got just a couple more minutes. We're going to take some more questions if we can get them. So if you have a question, make sure you submit out there. But so it's now, but this build is kind of an anniversary for you, Miguel. This is like 2 years, of Xamarin being officially part of Microsoft?
Yeah, it's 2 years.
Yeah, it's 2 years, yes.
2 years,
Yes.
How's it feel? And for you, it's what, like 4.5?
3.5, yeah.
3.5, yeah, 3.5 of...
I'm always joking that Microsoft owns Hockey App now longer than we owned Hockey App before the acquisition. So it's kind of like, halfway through the lifespan was the acquisition, yeah.
What would you say for both of you, kind of look, and you two, like looking back, what has changed the most, kind of since Xamarin was acquired, since Hockey App was acquired? Has there been a fundamental shift, change in mobile, do you think, that's happened, or things kind of remain on the same wavelength?
Fundamental change for the products, you mean?
For the products, or even for kind of the way that we do mobile development?
Well, I mean, the mobile development, the problem with mobile is that it changes every 6 months. So first off, it's an incredibly fluid market. Not counting the fact that Android and iOS update every year, major releases. But I think that internally, what happened with both your product and and the Xamarin Cloud products is that we got a bunch of technologies together and we made a complete offering, right? So at Xamarin we only had Test Cloud, which was a portion, and Xamarin Insights, and there were portions of a solution, but it wasn't the whole story. So I think that App Center, from that perspective, has been an incredible success in terms of how we aggregated all those technologies and stuff that Microsoft had in the form of VSTS and CI and CD and other couple of products that they had internally. And for us, in the Xamarin platform, we've kept a lot of the things that we did, but we were able to do things that, as a startup, we wouldn't have done.
Right.
So things like, for example, and these are key. They're things that I worked on for many years, but we just couldn't do it as a startup. And there were things like accessibility, making all of our products accessible. So it's been a massive effort, but we had to do that. We had plans at Xamarin to localize our products to run on 2 languages. We said, well, maybe we'll pick English and Spanish or Chinese, right? And now we're running 13 or 17 languages. So we localize everything on, and it goes across the board. We do the documentation, tutorials, all these things. So, and really what that does is that it expands the reach of who we can reach. It's, when you travel, you realize that there are countries where people have access to computers, but they don't speak English.
Right.
So even learning the C# language, right? Like if something, well, that's a word in English. So they can learn those ones, but when it comes to APIs, people in these countries have to learn English, and they have to learn, not only they have to learn the APIs, they have to learn these words that mean nothing to them, right? So if we can lower the barrier for them to actually get started, that's a big deal. And you go to Brazil, and people don't speak. They don't speak English.
You're right. I was there a couple of weeks ago for a conference, and you're exactly right. Unfortunately, though, we're out of time. So if you guys, we're hopefully to continue these conversations and more videos. We're going to be doing more Build Live content. We've got another session coming up. Miguel, you've got a session today.
Yep.
Samina, do you have any sessions coming up?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay, she's over. But where can people learn more about what's new in App Center and more about?
We still have 2 theater sessions tomorrow, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm on Channel 9 this afternoon with Donovan, and then of course go to appcenter.ms, and there's a little blue chat bubble in the bottom, and all the engineers and PMs will actually chat with you in the chat.
Okay, fantastic. All right, thank you both. Thank all 3 of you for being here. Jim, thank you for being a great co-host. And we're now going to give us a couple of minutes. We will be back live with another interview. Thanks so much.
Thank you.